Hey, it's Mac with PriceActionTradingSystem.com, and it is Monday, July the 29th. Somebody told me that I said in Friday's video that I said it was January. I haven't gone back to listen, so I'm sure I must have said it, but nobody else mentioned it, so I don't know if nobody else caught it or if maybe he listened to a January video and thought he listened to last month's. But I'll go check it. But I'm assuming that the gentleman is probably right, and I must have said it, but nobody else caught it or nobody else said anything anyway. If they did. But anyway, today is July the 29th. It's not January. I'm usually running a day behind, but I'm usually not running 6 months behind. So whatever I said, I must have been wrong. But anyway, let's talk about the trades. I saw this channel working down early. I saw this channel, and then it looked more like a trading range. But in the end, I believe we just had this down channel working down. And the one thing I'm always getting is people are always asking me about how do you find the trend lines, and generally you find them off the first couple of swings of the day, and so that would have been this right here. And so I was working this channel. We had a break and we had two tries to go lower. You really might have considered going long right there, but then when you had this failed second entry short, I really liked that, and that was the first trade I took. You might have gone long right here, and if you did, as long as you kept your stop, the signal bar would have been this bar right here. As long as your stop was below that, you probably would have been fine. And then we come up here, we make a double top and sell off. I was really tempted to sell this, but I wasn't sure if this line was going to be any good or not. Turns out that it was. Um, and really the way I originally drew this when we got that turn down. Actually, what I did first is you notice how I drew it off these first couple of swings at the low here, and but I wasn't sure if that's right, especially when it didn't hold to the tick right there, because usually it'll hold to the tick. And so I ended up, I wasn't sure about this, so I was a little hesitant to sell that. But even if you didn't have this, which is very, unless you've got some experience with it, you probably didn't. It's still a double top, so I might should have circled that in green. But I just was a little bit leery of that trade right there. I just wasn't crazy about it. And it's probably because I was just coming off a long. I was exiting a long right there, because any runners you could have ridden right up here. But once that little doji formed, that was probably a good time to exit. So you might have thought about entering short right there. I will go ahead and, because looking back on it, it does look a lot like a trading range, and so you could have traded it as such. But I think it's a little more aggressive. It's always better to rate on the second entry that came right here. And then you had this big bar, so you had to use a limit order on this one. But you can see it came back about halfway and before it went lower. And so that's why, and you're close right here to these possible lows. Really, they would have been down here if you're using the trading range, because the last close was way down here. So there's still room either way, but it depends on how you saw it. But this line did turn out to be valid in the end, coming off these first couple of closes right here. But I think originally I had it like this right here, and I actually had it drawn a little bit steeper where it was catching those closes, or catching those tails like that right there and catching those closes. I think I had it like that, and let's just see if that changes it, and that might change it to where the upper line is perfect. And you see that does fit pretty good right there. And it doesn't really catch these, but a lot of times I'll just adjust it a little bit. You drag it down, then look, it still fits perfect. And but we ended up with a little break right there, and that could have been enough. And then that's really two measured. I think that's really two measured legs down. I would call that leg one, and then this one leg two, and that's pretty close to being two measured legs down. So and then we've been rallying, but definitely down here you could have had this line. You should have drawn this short-term line coming up, and that would have kept you on this side up till you got back up here to the resistance. And even if you didn't have this channel, you still would have had this resistance coming across here. That would be way down here by now. That's where you get the most touches. You can see that's where we were finding resistance right there. So there's usually more than one way to get to the right place. But people have been asking me about the trend lines and how I find them. So I'm trying to show some of that in the videos, what I do with the videos. And once you find it on one side, you generally can find it on the other. And you saw how I did that. Of course, I did that one after the fact. But you would have had that price action there by the time you probably came in, because that's there by 4 or 5 o'clock. But starting off when I got here, I was looking at this or a possible trading range. And at that point, I had this line up here because that's where it fit the best early. And you got a newer low here. Notice that low is lower than that one, and this little swing here. And so it's a little failed break lower, another failed break. So then you get a failed second entry short, and then you got to guess you're coming up here to these highs, and if this is correct, up here to these highs, and at that point it would have been perfect. And you can see that I had mine a little lower, and it looked like it went on through there. So, but it does turn out later to be right. You can see that. I think I had it in the right place to begin with. We just got a little break higher right there, but I moved it up, and it still fits perfect. So, but it doesn't fit for the rest of the day, at least not well. But it's close. That just shows you that I'm always telling you, you don't have to be exact. Sometimes close is good enough, and if you're close, that would have pretty much given you all those same setups, except maybe not going short right there, because we wouldn't quite be back to the trend line yet. But I mean, you can see it's within a tick. So. And then of course this one touched, and but I really believe it's more like that right there, and then all these come into play, and that shows you why we probably didn't go lower from here, because we hadn't got back up to where they were, most of the people were looking to sell yet. We were short right there, and so they weren't ready to sell, and then once we touched, you can see what happened. The sell-off happens. So the trend line doesn't have to be exact, but you got to be close. You got to be in the ballpark. So, and generally all you got to do is find it on one side, and then you can find it on the other. But I like this long. It's a failed second entry short. Here's your new low. First entry short, second entry short. It's a two-legged pullback. We were finding strong support here as well anyway, and that's a reversal. And there's plenty of room before getting back up here or even here, and wherever we had this line, it still was plenty of room. Easy scalp. That was a nice trade this morning. That was the first one I took. I didn't take this one, but looking back on it, it's a little more aggressive. You're better off to wait on the second entry. So if you took this one, no problem. It was just being a little more aggressive. There's a little doji with plenty of room back to the EMA, back to test this breakout area, which usually happens. Of course, it went much lower than that. And then you get the second entry short, and if you adjusted your line to that, then that pretty much had you in the right place for the rest of the day. And again, this is such a big bar. You want to use a limit order, maybe a tick or two back in. I think I used the bottom of this one, 2 ticks back in, and you see it did come back and fill it. And if you didn't enter here, you could have entered here, because now you got a failed second entry long, and that would have been on the break below this right here. And it got just enough to scalp out, and then it bounced again. And I didn't see anything else I liked here. You might have considered going long here, but with all that overlap, the price is making lower lows and lower highs, the possibility that there's a bigger channel. I think you were better off to wait. This trade here was really interesting, and I almost got suckered into this trade. Let me back out a little more here and get this out of the way. There's a failed second entry short here. But because the trend line was right here, there wasn't enough. And I almost took that trade anyway, because I watch these traps, and they rarely, if ever, fail. But for some reason, I just didn't feel comfortable with that one, and I didn't take it. And I'm glad I didn't, because it turned down. But even if you did get trapped there, when it turns back down, you got to at least exit. You might have even wanted to reverse. And by exiting right there, the most that happens is you lose 2 ticks, maybe 3 ticks. And if you reversed, you make it all the way back. But I just sat tight, so then I got a chance to go short right there. And I was really thankful, because I can't remember the last time I saw a trade like that fail. But it did. It failed. And but it's because we were just coming off the upper side of that trend line, and we weren't quite there yet. and they tested it 1, 2, 3 times, and then off it went. And any runners would have been safe. This was really one of the better entries of the day. And your runners would have been safe off that one too if you took them. And that's what happens. Usually the best trades, that's where your runners are usually safe. And so you could ride this all the way down. And you're looking for it to come in down here. You might have even had it here. You see we got real close to that. We get more touches right here. And it looks like a little overshoot. And, of course, you get the overshoot over here, so then that fits together. And so I believe it was really probably right down through there. And then we bounce. And like I said, I like this long because we got a little failed break right here. We got a higher high, a pullback, another higher high, then a pullback, and we bounced. It looks it's really close. We went one tick shorter here, but it's almost like a failed second entry short, but that's a big bearish bar. And so I'm guessing a lot of people got tricked right there. But another thing, I don't have it on here, if you'd had this little short-term trend line in here, and you might have really, the way I had it drawn, was it looks more like a spiking channel there. But you could have drawn it either way, and it probably would have worked out. But if you draw it like that, you see it spiked down and went in this little channel, and you'll see it fits on both sides pretty good. And we've had the break and then a new low, and this was a second entry. This was really a first entry pullback, second entry, but it's like a breakout pullback long across that right there, and you can see that right there. And it came off of this trend line, so you got to figure we're coming back up here. And usually I tell you I don't want to take a counter trend trade, but that's kind of a trap right there. And also the fact that this looked kind of rangy, and if you measure this range, it's going to be an equal move down too. So I like that long right there, and it took it a minute to get going, but it was a fairly easy scalp. And then of course this was a chance to get short off the upper side again. This one did come back, and this is why I always like to use 2 ticks. I wanted to show you this one. I actually entered here, and I came within 1 tick. You can see there's 1 tick above that one, but I always use 2 ticks, and you can see I survived that, and I actually added on another set right here when it went back down, because now you got you kind of got a trap to the long side, and it got just enough to scalp out both of those, and 2 easy trades, and I was done for the day. And we hadn't had a lot of volume this afternoon, but this was the first break, so you might have considered going long there. I don't really like that. You got to figure we're probably going to make a new high, but there's always a chance you don't get through this trend line right here. And so I don't know. It's always easy to say after the fact, yeah, I probably would have taken that, because you can see it. But looking back on it, when all I could see was that right there, and that's what it would have looked like, I'm not so sure, because there's not much room left there. But if you're following the trend line rules, the rules say you probably should take it, because we're going to try a retest, and even if you only retest this line, still enough to probably get out. And you can see it went much higher, and we're still making higher highs and higher lows. And there might even be, there might even be a bigger channel here, like so. Let's just see, it fits pretty good across the bottom. I'm not really liking the way it fits across the top too well. Unless it's going to be pretty wide like that. That's a possibility. It's obvious that short term that was a proper trend line there, and we got a break and a new high, so I'm guessing we're probably going to sell off there. I don't know. There's still 45 minutes left in the day. We'll just have to see how it goes. But that's what I saw today. We really just had a little weak downtrend, and you might have seen it more of a trading range that broke lower and made another equal distance move down in the next trade, and then we've been kind of working up since then. So not a lot of entries today. A couple of them were pretty good entries, but not very many entries. But it wasn't that difficult to really read the price action today. You really needed to follow, if you just followed the range rules starting out, and and then realized when there was a trap, and you might have gotten off track right here, but you can see coming down here we're making lower highs all the way down. This high's lower than that one, this one's lower than that, this one's actually lower than that one, this is like a double top, this one's lower than that one. So that's a good clue that, hey, we're probably, the buyers are losing control. They're getting weaker each time, and the lows are getting a little bit lower each time until this one they finally give up, and boom, they got it through that support area, and then they hit all the stops, and boom, off it goes. So not a great trading day, but not a bad one either. It wasn't that hard really to figure out right in here that this was more like a range than anything. But hopefully you found these trend lines, and that would have helped you, and that would have given you your clue to look for where prices somewhere between here and here. You should have been expecting prices to bounce down here if you found this trend line off the top. So you should have definitely had that in place by here, and that's a good hour at least, maybe longer, before you make this bottom right down here. And so that's how I do it, and that's how you know if your channel's valid, if prices fit real nicely like they do right here. Now if you draw this down through there, and what I'll do is I'll see people draw them, and they may have it like this, and then they copy this one and they bring it over here and they put it down here, and you see it kind of semi-fits there, but that isn't holding prices neatly. So there's odds are that isn't right, and move your lines around till you see it holding prices real neatly, and then you probably got it right. And sometimes you may have to draw it off the lows to find it off the highs. You can see that fits pretty good down through there, and then if I just make a copy of it, move it over, it fits perfectly. You can see there's a little spike down in the channel working down, a break, a new low, and then we reversed and went the other way. And let's just see how this one fits. You can see that fits nicely. It's holding prices neatly there until you got resistance here and it couldn't get it back up there. And you see, even once it got back up here in it, it's holding them again. Look at that. That's a good sign. That's how I know my trend lines are right, by how well they hold prices. And you can see this is holding prices neatly down through there, and if you copy and drag it down to here, it's holding prices neatly on the other side too. So the odds are that I wasn't the only one seeing that, and the price action was reacting to it, and it worked perfect. It got a break. It tried to make a new low, but there was too much support here. Notice that anytime the market tries to do something twice, we broke out, we went once, we tried it again, it failed, and it reversed and went higher. And then it tried this area twice, it failed, it went lower, and it's working lower. And then it tried to get through here 3 times, it couldn't, so it went back up until it finally came on down again. And I didn't mean to drag that there. So that's really about it for today. Like I said, there were only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 really good setups, 8 counting this one, and you might have taken one off these low sides. There could have been up to 9 or 10. And somebody always never fails. They'll ask me about another trade I don't mention, say that I don't talk about it. But there's a lot of more aggressive, advanced type trades that I will not mention. Doesn't mean that you weren't reading the price action right. So if you want to ask me about it, feel free to. But just because I don't mention it doesn't mean it's not there. It just didn't fit in with what I saw, or it was counter trend from what I was looking at, and I just didn't like it. What I try to show are your basic, your highest probability trades to maybe a few intermediate trades like this one. But the real advanced trades where you're buying lows and buying, off the other side of the channel, like right here on a down. I'll tell you all day long, just stay away from these, because you don't know when you're going to get it right. It looked like it was going to bounce here. It looked like it was going to bounce here, and then here and here, and they all kept working lower. And sometimes they'll work on down and just keep going down the line, and you're buying every time, and you just keep getting trapped. So it's your best opportunity is to get on with a trend. And you can be, just like here, I was early, but I still survived this trade because it didn't hit my stop. So you can be wrong counter trend trading, or trading with a trend, and still be okay. But you can't be wrong when you're counter trend trading, because if you're wrong counter trend trading, you don't know when it's, you're trying to get long right here, up in here, and next thing you know, it's down here 5 points lower, or worse than that, on a day when it's really rallying, like you're trying to get short in here, next thing you know, it's 10 or 15 or 20 points higher. And you can't risk that. But you can, if you're going with the trend, just like right here, I was a little bit early, as long as I kept my stop. Otherwise, you lost a couple of ticks right here. You probably lost 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 ticks on that trade. But if you had it 2 ticks higher and you survived it, and you would have been able to scalp out, you wouldn't have got any runners. But there's a lot of trades we don't get any runners. That's not the runner is just, we hope we always catch a runner, but we're not. And that's why we do what we do. We scalp out part of it and take all our risk off the table, and then hope we get a runner. So, but that's about it for today. I'm going to wrap it up. This is Mac with PriceActionTradingSystem.com, and we'll see you next time.